Voila.
Hello, everybody. This is James Diboe, Discovering, dedicated to original peoples. And we've got a special guest in, Edison Agbandje from Ancestral Essence. How are you doing, my brother?
Very, very good. Grateful that you made the link. I was glad.
Definitely. The ancestors are here for the reason, and they're always here to guide us. And we're able to connect with different peoples, like-minded peoples, wherever we go on this planet. You know, so that's what I'm about anyway. If I could start from the beginning, not long ago I had Ancestral Voices on Verona. Interesting discussion. And I was watching yours, and I weren't sure if you were connected.
We know each other very well.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I thought, I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff you were talking about the spirit. I've watched it on a few different, been on your channel, seen a couple of different talks, and the way you project your knowledge, and you really do it in such a calm manner, which is very important. Sometimes people get very too hyperactive or they get too extreme, so I really appreciate how your mannerisms and how you deal with African spirituality. And just give us a little introduction to your beginning of this.
Okay, well, as you said, you've got my name, Edison Agbandje, Ancestral Essence. We've been doing this doing it in the public domain for about 10 years, where essentially I started off doing this personally for about 20, 30 years, where I've been connected to my ancestors. I've been speaking to them for that long. And we've been teaching people how to do the same, to connect, not in a sort of necessarily ritual way, but just in an everyday way. You're walking along, you're having a conversation. We try to help you jumble the thoughts that you're having in your head and basically find out exactly who you're speaking to. And then you can maintain the relationship even after the person's passed. So we've known how to do that for, like I said, 10 years doing courses, and we've expanded it beyond just talking to them, but them actually taking you on journeys within yourself to different dimensions, different places, and enabling you to actually access all the information that you have within yourself from your ancestral realm, and also from your mind, your memories, and your connections to other dimensions. So essentially, we've been trying to not so much focus on the initiations and focus on the rituals, but more focusing on you. Because everyone we found was focused on taking you away from yourself and putting you in some other story, or saying what's on your head, or saying something which puts you in a position where now you have to investigate outside of yourself to understand yourself. So we try to take it the other way and have you travel within yourself, so you actually hear and trust your own inner voice to be able to guide you on your journey. So that's where we're coming from anyhow.
Yeah, very interesting, especially when you mention about dimensions. I'm always looking at things all the time when I'm on the internet, different dimensions, fifth dimensions, and all different areas. And so I'm very there. And dimensions are very interesting. Plus as well, even the communication of the ancestors. Like, for example, we hear about religion talking about the angels. Now, the angels is the equivalent to the ancestors, it seems, if you was to, what would you say?
In honesty, I don't, if someone says that for themselves, that's fine. But I'm always trying to run away from concepts I can't prove. Ideas that I don't have, that are not mine. I don't liken the connection to the ancestors to any angels or spirit guides. If someone does, then that's their prerogative, because they're talking about their inner communication. But me personally, I'm focused on who I'm speaking to. And if it's my ancestors or an older version of myself in a different dimension or parallel dimension, then I'm aware of who I'm speaking to at all times. And we've got various methods to check so that I'm not guessing.
Yeah.
So I don't like to guess with angels, this and that. Some people do, and I'm totally fine with it. But me personally, no, and I don't advocate it, because it's like looking for religious concepts, and people sometimes you can't find them out of the books that you read their name from.
That's right. Definitely agree with that. I mean, the unseen realm, obviously, you know, it's beyond our dimension, but there's certain times in our life that we're able to connect with it. I mean, we connect all the time, but there's particular times you really feel the vibrations there. I mean, on some of the journeys I've been on, traveling in Southeast Asia, Africa, just sometime by myself, 7 hours, and not knowing even where you're going, not going there like everything's custom made for you. It was finding your way and making it an experience. And I did feel at times the ancestors really guided me on these journeys, though, where, for example, I remember even like being on a coach now, first got on the bus actually in Thailand. I was going on a 7-hour drive. And no one was giving me proper information where I'm going to find the Mani tribe. These are the indigenous original peoples. And there's only about 300 people left. So first of all, it's also a task that majority of people don't even know these people in their own country. That was the first task. The second task was trying to find how to get there. And then along the way, it's trying to communicate with people. And it's not until I showed the pictures of these, like a screenshot I had on my phone, of the people. And a lot of people were very surprised on the bus that I was going to visit them because they have never, ever experienced being around them, and they're from that country. So when I've got to the south of town, which is a lot more different, then I've somehow got a ride to the jungle through. It was like a local, it's like a little village area I was going to stay in. And they got a driver to take me into the jungle, the rainforest. Got there in the nighttime, and I didn't actually plan to get there in the nighttime. I was hoping to get there in the daytime. So we got there in the nighttime, and I've got video footage, I've got some good pictures. But I felt guided there because there's a lot of things along the way where I remember having my passports on me, and people were saying to me, you know, you better be careful with the passports on you, you know, and there's a lot of things and it was even quite difficult to even get a ride to go and see them, because even though I'd done my 7-hour journey, it was still, you'd have to find someone to take you in there, especially in the night, because you have like things like blow darts and stuff like that, you know. So I'm going to meet, speaking of spirituality, I'm seeing a common kind of spirituality amongst a lot of indigenous groups around the world.
Okay.
Even though not everyone has their little differences, but I really see a connection of the first peoples. It's almost like when people left Africa in the beginning, that they took the spirituality with them.
Yes.
And the ones who were able to keep that old knowledge and culture intact seem to be the surviving little few people to this day I see in Asia or the Pacific or Australia. Only the few of them who are still practicing. And that keeps it alive. It's like keeping this great energy going of hopefully this is a return. Hopefully the return will happen, you know, where they are now having these conversations. So you tell us a time in your life now where you really feel they were really there, the ancestors at that time. You felt the guidance at that particular time in your life.
Well,
your life.
I'll be honest with you. Okay, let me go back to before I could speak to them, because my way of thinking is I don't utter a sentence without them adding some words. They're always part of everything I say and everything I do, because effectively we are mentally entwined. We're not separated by idea of me being a physical body or some idea of me being a story. We are all one and we're all connected. I always refer to myself as we as opposed to me, just because I know essentially I'm connected to them. But let me go to a classic story of when I was, for some reason, drawn to pick up feathers. I was walking along, I was seeing these white feathers everywhere I was going. I said, oh, white feathers. And something said to me, you know what, pick them up for good luck. I don't know what it was because I didn't know how to really connect to my thoughts, but something said, pick up these feathers. So I started picking them up, putting them in my back pocket, putting them in my jacket, putting them in my bag, putting them everywhere I would go. I would carry one of these these feathers with me. So one day I'm going to a shop in North London, it's not there anymore, called Head Start. And in Head Start, they had this guy who was running the bookshop, and me and him used to speak, so it was quite cool. But he said there was this South African Zulu shaman here. I said, okay, then. I said, all right. But he's got someone with him. You're going to have to wait a little while. I said, okay, I'll wait. What's the problem? All right. So I waited a little while. I got out with him. He started speaking, and he had this strange divination thing or strange to me, where he would use a rope. I've got my own systems, but he had this rope and he could see how it was manipulated, and that would give him information. Anyhow, he gave me the reading, that was fine. And at the end of the reading, when I'm just about to leave, he said, look, before you go, I have to basically make you aware there's a Native American guy, and he's on a horse, and he's been throwing feathers. He likes your light, so he's been throwing feathers to gather your attention. Yeah, and then I said, and he said, his name is White Feather. So when I went into my back pocket, what did I pull out?
White feather.
The White Feather. So straight away, I knew I was connected to him. And later on, I found out he was one of my grandfathers from a parallel life. But essentially, he had seen me and still saw my energy and still was trying to communicate me to let me know that world exists. So that was an obvious, a simple story. I tell all the time of different scenarios where you know that they're with you, but all the time and various things we do, we're always consulting them first, we're consulting them afterwards, and we consult them after any sort of ritual or cleansing we do to check that the thing has been done. We don't work in a hope and see, and we've developed situations where we don't need to embark on special rituals or there's special auspicious times. This is something that's with you constantly all the time, and something that you're constantly doing. The same way I'm speaking to you is the same way I speak to them. And the same way I would ask you a question is the same way. And everything is really building your confidence that you trust your own thoughts and don't doubt it and need to ask someone else. Is that really what I'm thinking? When you really know yourself. So it's really just, how do you say, separating the gap between you and your own spirit world that lives within you. Because the spirit world isn't anywhere other than behind your eyes.
You're right. Yeah. That's right. So what's your take on God, for example? Some people have different views of God. Some people see God as the outsiders. Some people see God as we're our own gods. Some don't even believe.
It's a difficult one because African spirituality, they think, is connected to a load of different deities. And I suppose on a more popular religion or popular religious spiritual paradigm, that is the case. They're looking for the Most High, they're looking for this, they're looking for that. But the old ones, the ancient ones, the indigenous ones, always knew that you were the creator of your own reality and the spirit world was in you. And this is why when you're looking for God or you're about to pray, what's the thing you automatically do? Close your eyes. Because you know that whatever you're looking for is within you, not outside of you.
That's right. That's it. So even at the years, I had someone on my show from South Africa, Tata, and he's deep into his spirituality now. And when I broke it down, I was explaining there, I said, what's your take on God? And he said, they call it the Great Spirit.
Okay.
So when we say Great Spirit, that's usually just good enough rather than go into something totally what you can't see, prove or nothing, you know what I mean? I thought Great Spirit, because that is not a likeness. You're not painting, it looks like this. It could look like wind. I don't know. We don't even give a likeness. Because to give it a likeness, you can only give the likeness of yourself.
I'll be honest, I don't really subscribe to the Great Spirit.
Yeah, okay.
Only because depending on how far you go with your own consciousness within yourself and see how you manifest reality, you realize that what you call life is really the picture that's playing inside your mind. So you have to look at who is the one creating the image that you see inside your mind, because that's what you perceive reality to be. And the only person that really is yourself. And really it's taking back the spiritual technology, you could say, of how it is that there is a different set of intelligences within your mind that have the capacity to break down external information and recreate the image or the visual simulation that you see in your mind. And that's really you. You're the creator of your own visual life experience. So therefore, once you understand how you put your images and your thoughts and your details together, you can get to the point where you start to slow down and not create what you've been programmed to create. So when a situation comes, you have a mental program that doesn't program it like your education. You've now been given through your ancestors and various other different older versions of yourself that when someone speaks to you, what you're really trying to do is reconstruct a simulation from what they've said. You're trying to imagine it. So therefore, there's a part of your mind that processes words and generates an image from that.
So kind of like manifestation, projection. For example, I remember before I went to the Fiji Islands, I went there twice, but before the first time I went, there was a lot of things that I could see similar to our ancestors, and especially in Fiji, they'd say that they actually say they came from Africa, Lake Tanganyika. So before I went there, I was having like, where you're getting, not just in your mind, it's also your body, the feeling as well of what type of vibrations you're picking up. And I had a feeling I'm going to meet someone of importance. I couldn't say it was this bit. I couldn't pinpoint, but I knew when I got there. So when I got there now, and I'm just speaking to the local people and that, and it's not until we really connected that there was an older man called Kelly. He was one of the elders, about 75. And he's the one who recommended he's going to take me to meet the chief. And it's not like you can just go and meet the chief, and there's certain little rules to be even around the chief, and even when you're walking towards the chief, and it's the certain rules and that. So once I connected with them, and I remember the day I was going, it was raining. There was such sunshine all week, but and it was almost that type of rain where should you go back because it's really bad raining, and it's not like you're dressed in a big coat because you're not going there like that. So forth. You know what? Just keep going. He said, "No, we must go. We must go today," and that's good luck about raining. We got there now and got to sit there. We first had to knock on the spokesman's door before we could even go to the chief's house. So they only live opposite each other anyway. So you knocked on the spokesman's, then he take your shoes off. He goes in first, then he lets the chief know, and then brings you in. And then we had to sit down, and he was asking a bit of a question, but before, there's a lot of like, do 3 claps. This is what I can always remember. So when I was being introduced by one of the people who taught me, he kept on saying something about Nigeria, but he's speaking their language. But all I'm picking up is Nigeria. So it was like almost I'm figuring out what he's saying, even though I can't understand them. So he allowed me to speak after so long, but I had to do 3 claps as well, I remember. And he was also drinking, they have kava plant.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the kava, I had some kava with them. I also had to present the chief with kava as well. And we got to speak for a long time. Then the next day, I go to meet him now again. But this time I'll come back to the picture. First with the introduction. And so now I'm going back there. When I got there now, there was a different guy there. He wasn't aware of me coming. And he was considered the warrior of the tribe. Who makes the rules or somehow has an influence on the chiefs
Yeah.
and stuff. So he had me, I'd stay in the room about like 40 minutes before the chief come out, because he wanted to know, how did you get to meet him without going through him?
Okay.
And I couldn't give an answer to that. And he knew the person who took me the first day wasn't able to come the second day. So someone else had to take me, because he had to go to a funeral.
Yeah.
Sudden. And so after the end, he brought the chief out in the end. And then everything went fine afterwards, but he was so confused of how did you connect with the chief without going through him. And then that's when I realized that this is much more deeper.
Yeah.
This is part of the spiritual mission of
Yeah.
before I even left. I'm Fiji 22 hours or whatever it is. And then the vibration of connecting, and universally, this is something that we have anyway, the ability in us. But it's like there's so many distractions.
That is the issue. It's your mind is distracted by other thoughts. But it's an interesting story you tell. And you see where there is different customs in these different villages. And this is not based on just haphazard rituals. This is actual energies that require this kind of behavior before there's balance in the place. For when you realize that the air around you is alive and has its own opinions and decides what comes to you and what doesn't come to you. And your ancestors walk before you. So before you speak to anyone, your ancestors has already agreed and made the decision whether you're going to meet them or not. So based on where you guys meet up or recognize each other from previous incarnations, you'll walk into a room and the energy from your previous incarnations will be part of your energy matrix, which they'll recognize. And whereas they may say to someone else, we're not letting you through, but when they see you, for some reason, the thought doesn't take them. All of a sudden they say, of course, why not? And obviously the other person who knows how things are supposed to take place is bemused, because it's like, well, how did you get past? And being confused because he doesn't recognize that you have traveled to that place and found that place because your energy is connected to that place.
Yeah, definitely felt that. Definitely. Yeah. So it's interesting, even like the different type of energy forces you can feel in different parts of the world. It's like different energies, and some you might even meet your first time there, but you recognize this energy. It's like it's your past life, or it's some sort of connection.
It's also in your bones.
In your bones.
When I go to Nigeria, as soon as I land on the ground, I feel totally different.
Totally different.
Because my parents, obviously being from there, their ancestors all had a connection with that land.
That's right.
And their ancestors had a vibration from the food they consumed on that land. That's why whenever someone says, where are you born? And they say you're from this place, you're not from this place. You just entered this world from that place.
That's right. See, that goes beyond. You go beyond. That's right.
So
it's beyond just, okay, first people from Africa, as we know, but that doesn't mean that was the beginning.
That is a much bigger story. Beyond any of the books they've allowed us to read. Because the first people on this earth didn't come from the earth.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting?
So therefore, when you're speaking of your ancestors, and when people say they come from Africa, they come from this, no, your ancestors came into this dimension in that name, in that place, named in that way.
Yeah.
Their energy came from somewhere else. Your mother would give birth to you. Your consciousness comes from another dimension, and your mother is the gateway into this dimension. But your consciousness starts from somewhere else. That's why when people need to go to certain places, it's great, because the energy from that place reminds them of who they are. Our bodies are antennas. Our eyes are antennas. Our ears are antennas. Our mouths are antennas. We don't see with our eyes. We don't hear with our ears. We don't taste with our tongue. We don't touch with our skin. What we actually do is, because they're antennas, they take in information. We then send the information to our mind, and our mind recognizes the frequency of those things. And as it knows the name of those frequency of those things, then it says, oh yes, you're drinking this, and this is the flavor, and I remember the flavor. So you didn't recognize the thing in your tongue. You didn't recognize the flavor in your tongue. You recognized it in your mind, because that's where everything is really taking place. So the ancients all knew that there is nothing out here other than your belief. And if they needed to go anywhere to see anything, to understand anything, they closed their eyes and traveled within themselves. The only problem is we have now is people like to say this magic word within, and they don't actually explain how it's done and what you're supposed to do and how your mind is set up to access a different part of your mind, which then creates a platform that you can interface with different dimensions, past lives, other situations, all different things. But you set up a platform in your mind where that journey can be made, and you're able to do that.
Definitely. Yeah. Interesting. Now, you get some people who always subscribe to science a lot. When we say science, I mean, we had science a long time ago in Kemet and most of Africa, but Western science, as we know it, about this common ancestor with apes and Big Bang theory. So,
in truth, the more you take journeys within yourself and you see parallel lives, well, all of those parallel lives, part of the Big Bang story, there's a whole thing. See, I, again, from West Africa, and from my ancestry, I have different sides. My grandfather is one side, my grandmother is another side, and my grandfather's another side. Even though they're from the same village, they didn't start in the same village. So I do have a natural link to the Yoruba tradition, Ifa. I love the Yoruba, and I studied it for many years. That's where I found my base, because in truth, that was the African tradition where there's most written about, where you can find most information. And most of us as a pattern goes through that school. Yeah, there's a point though where you get to where you know of all the names, you know of all the things, but you can't do anything.
Right.
You're just a storyteller, and the ability to access those energies and speak with them and work with them is not something that is often taught in a way that you can do it matter of fact. There's a reverence connected when all these things are really just part of you. And even in the young writings of these things, they tell you that you're part of you. Anyhow, I say all of that to speak of their creation story, and how you start to appreciate that the Orishas or the Orumalis, and when they came down, that depending what you're reading, 800 and something, 400 and something, came and created this dimension. They were the dimension builders. So when it was someone ascribed to make fish, they designed the fish. There was someone that came and designed the fish, designed the trees, designed the birds, designed the bees, designed the insects, designed the humans, created all these different avatars, because these things are avatars to inhabit living conscious beings, because the tree is as live as me and you. It might not move in a way that we can recognize, but it grows, it has branches, it has children, it has grandchildren. Yeah, when its children are old and ready to leave home, they drop down as fruit into the ground, as seeds. Yeah. So the tree is still spreading its seed, and it's still procreating with the earth.
That's right.
And the seeds lead off the earth, because people keep saying, we're all fruitarians and all this, not knowing that the fruit is really the food given to the seed before the seed grows roots into the earth and is able to eat from the earth. So the fruit isn't there for us, it's there for the seeds that are there. It's their basically food source. But we've worked out that obviously it's nutritious for them, so it's nutritious for us. Anyhow, we're saying all of this in the concept of this dimension was built by several intelligences. And each of these intelligences, this wasn't their first rodeo. This wasn't the first and only dimension that they built.
Yeah.
So they built several. So when you start to go deeper within it, you start to realize that we're living in a dimension where our consciousness inhabits a particular type of avatar. Because there's avatars, the bees, all these different things. And over phases of time, your consciousness learns to be able to inhabit more complex avatars. So the energy in a bee is not of the same intelligence of one like yourself. The consciousness in the bee doesn't have as complicated a lifespan, span, or story as you do. And your consciousness is one that is in a slightly more robust and able to think of this and do that avatar. So these orishas create the avatar. So the Africans have their own science because their spirituality is really science, but science that the Western world only acknowledges when they have found it and worked out the formula. Oh yeah, we got it, let's call it this. And then now it's their science instead of ours. So therefore you understand that, you say, okay, that's this. But we work out, and when you travel within yourself, understand yourself, that you are really science. And you, if you was working from the concept of you being a computer, because there's a lot of analogies of how the computer was developed from the human mind. It turns out that you are unwittingly a software engineer. All your thoughts are literally information that you processed into images inside your mind. And they do have the ability to manipulate the images and create emotions so that you can feel something towards. So you've almost created this whole system to enable you to experience this reality that you're in. When you go into the deeper sciences, they're teaching you how you create reality. They're not telling you to worship it. They're not telling you to follow it. They're explaining to you to how your mind is creating your reality. They're taking you towards, if you want to call a God, they're taking it towards your creative self and how you operate from that. And once you understand that being, the real being that is you, the consciousness that is you, you start to fade away from all these artificial manipulated stories, trying to basically get you to leave your own God self and basically make those ideas God so that you can be monetized from that point onwards.
It's interesting, science in the ancient world, especially in Kemet or the Dogon, Yoruba. And this is why it's a shame, because science is such a great thing. And it seems like it had its place in the ancient world. But in this day and age, within science can become a god. It's solve the impossible. The mysteries are all solved just because we have science. You know, so it's a real shame, like, because science is such a great thing if it's used right.
It is still a great thing, because
it's still a great thing. I mean,
the reason I say that is that we shouldn't deny the creation of everyone in this world. Everyone is part of this world. So science will work in their own world, and that's part of their religion. And we work in our own world, and our connections with our ancestors and traveling into different dimensions and be given different explanations to phenomena in the world is our science. And all the different manipulations of reality, when you get down to the deep nuts of it, you start to realize that there are certain intelligences creating reality. I'm not speaking about gods, I'm speaking about the intelligence behind water, the intelligence behind fire, the intelligence behind earth, the intelligence behind air, which is similar to water, but essentially these intelligences are the ones that are behind everything. They're the building blocks. But guess what? Because of who you are, you must have all these intelligences working within you. Your body is 8% water. So the intelligence that creates water is something that part of your mind connects to in order to create it within yourself. You generate heat. So the intelligence that heats objects to basically make them combust or generate that heat must exist within you as well. So you actually have a mental relationship with that intelligence. The same thing with air in your lungs, the same way the semen and the egg, they have no solid parts, but they have the capacity to generate solid parts. They have the capacity to generate bones, teeth, all that kind of thing, when none of them come with any, so they come as fluids. So there's intelligence within those fluids to be able to create those solid parts. So we have all the building blocks within us to be able to create this reality. The only thing is, we're kind of lost in a little movie storyline, which was given to us as children to play out. So it's like someone gave you an arcade game, but you don't play on the machine that they give you, you play in your mind. And before you know, you're there trying to aspire to be a great game player, where you're not living your life, you're playing someone else's game.
Yeah. So intelligent life forces are out there and can manipulate or like work with us or work against us.
Yes.
Positive, negative. So from that perspective, it's because the balance is like in my and for example, negative and positive. Like the car battery don't work without both, isn't it?
Exactly.
So negative is not always bad. Sometimes negative can be good. Sometimes positive can. It's funny sometimes. Depends who you're talking to.
Are they not judgments?
Yeah.
They're judgments of events. So
yeah.
Sometimes you're prevented from going somewhere because there was danger ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time it seemed negative. But when you see what was at the other end, you realize that thankfully your ancestors didn't allow you to be able to make that journey that you emotionally wanted to make, but you weren't aware of what was at the other side.
That's right. Yeah. That's it. There's something in your mind, something in you that just tells you, something's out of guarding you. And you got to be guarded properly, like you say.
Exactly.
And you know the voices, in your head.
So when another voice is saying, do it, you're in a rush, you've got to make this money, you've got to do this thing. There's the other voice in your head saying, the money that you make can't pay for what goes wrong.
Well, interesting thing about life forces and that, I'm looking at the pyramids, for example, and it's just like people just don't get it to this day. No. Western science, anything, they don't really get it, how.
See,
how we were done.
I'm laughing. Not because of what you're saying, but do you think the Masons don't know what's going on?
Oh, well, see, that's a whole other thing then,
Isn't it so? Yeah, so the thing is, they do know, but they've given us this watered down version, so we won't go and look for what's really going on.
That's right, yeah. It's because that's it. You've got to investigate yourself, isn't it? You've got to, because there's a story that you've fed from the beginning. So our own experiences, and that's what it's really about. And the Dogon, another tribe, Mali, speaking about beings coming from the stars and giving them the knowledge.
Yeah.
So, things like that, some people just that's just creation, that's just myth, but sometimes you got to really think about these things, what they're saying, and connecting to it. There's obviously metaphors. So when you say beings, it's not an actual image described. You could describe, you can see paintings, you can see masks. On masks.
But
it's much more deeper than that. There's always these metaphors behind something. Some people could read the religious books and say every single word literally.
Yeah, it's true.
Some people might be able to be, well, I know this is a fact, or this is, but this one. So, and you could say the same with ancient Kemet. Some things were mythical, and then some things they felt was factual. Some things. So, like for example, yeah, I'm sure you've heard David Icke.
Yes, of course. I love David Icke. I've been to see him and everything. So
Yeah, interesting.
I've read many of his books and listened to many of his books. And
He's
he,
Credo Mutual, he always
I
speaks on.
remember, mhm, that
Yeah,
was
it's
really good as well.
yeah, interesting. Some of the stuff he speaks on and that, and obviously it's from. I'm aware that he goes out and visits. He was traveling around, getting knowledge in that. So sometimes that open man, but I can see where the source of the knowledge come from. Like for example, Credo Mutua,
Mm,
it's a big influence on him. He's a big influence on a lot of people on this type of journey.
mm.
Do you think there's any part of David Icke where he's not exaggerating or he can't really comprehend some stuff?
No, in honesty, I've got a lot of respect for him.
Yeah.
And how do you say? I remember one of my first teachers, what he said was, no one man can drink the whole sea. He can only drink his portion.
That's right.
So therefore, you must always be aware of everyone bringing their portion to the table to discuss. So David Icke will bring his portion of the information that he's been privy to and what has come his way, because all of us, we download information from our minds. Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying before, and not to take too much of a leap from it, but whereas all those people from those ancient cultures, they receive information from within themselves.
Yeah.
Because whenever someone is speaking to you as a human being, they're going to ask you a question, and then you're going to use your inner voice, which is not you, to ask that question within your mind.
That's right.
And once you've asked that question,
yeah,
you're waiting for a voice inside you to give you the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And those guys learned to be able to take the question beyond their memories of what they've been given and access other dimensions within themselves, which we all do. Hence, we now and again come up and say, oh God, where did that come from? You say something which even confuses you, the level of accuracy or the level of complexity to that information. All of us have access to those realms, to those places. And much of what we're always trying to do is get you to the point where you can travel with your ancestors and they can take you to these dimensions where you can pick up this information and be able to see something. I know it sounds wild because many people that practice spirituality just practice a different type of religion. And they're not actually seeing that their consciousness or their spirit, their consciousness really, is using the spirit as a vehicle to travel to different dimensions within themselves. You know, we're very good at repeating and doing these different things instead of just sitting down and finding out something. If you had one of those older Babalawos that weren't necessarily connected in the Yoruba tradition, that weren't connected to just doing readings for you, if you had a situation, they would sit back, close their eyes, travel within themselves, travel to the dimension where that information to that situation would reside. And then they would hear someone tell them on the other side and write down the recipe of what needs to be done over here, what needs to be brought. So they would be ones that would carry information from other dimensions within themselves and bring it to this one. All of us have the capacity to do this. But the first thing we do is look in a book, look to someone, look, let me pray to this, let me pray to that, where the connection that same person you're going to ask, who's going to go within themselves, is just that they trust their channel more than you trust yours.
Yeah. I did actually go to see him one time, actually, in Amsterdam. It must have been about 8 hours, the whole show, and it was some interesting.
Credo, David Icke.
Sorry?
David Icke.
David Icke, yeah.
I did 11 hours in Wembley.
Yeah.
That was a day.
I mean, I even got there late and I was still 8 hours. And you had a dinner break. You have little breaks, don't you?
We had a little break, but my God, it was long. But I had read the book and he had said stuff outside of the book, which was interesting. I think he was talking about Saturn and how most of the religions are really worshiping Saturn.
Really
The
called
dog
Satan,
star and all
Saturn.
of that is the dog collar, and everything comes from there. So again, like I said, there's a lot of information that he brought and made me aware of, and I'm very grateful for him doing what he did. You take literally, how do you say? I like to say that you get information, then travel within yourself to verify it.
Yeah.
Go and see where that information takes you or leads you to. So all of us, everyone that speaks, is just a trigger for you to go somewhere else and do something else.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that really stood out what he said about 6,000 years ago. You know, a lot of things is based on 6,000 years.
Yeah, 6.
Now, this is very important periods of time, whether you're looking at history, whether you're looking at religion, in some, the Bible might say 6,000 years or something. And
yeah, I was trying to remember that. Go on, Karen, please.
But the 6,000 years anyway is, he mentions, I remember them announcing it when he was on the stage, and I've watched him on other shows, about 6,000 years ago was the origin, the first time of the origin of the white race. This is what, out of his words, and don't get me wrong, Elijah Muhammad said something similar. That was so you're trying to make connections with things. So Elijah Muhammad says the Europeans are 6,000 years old. Now, David, like, he doesn't actually say it in them words, but he says the origin of the white race 6,000 years ago, the fallen angels or something, as married the son, daughter, all that one. I don't want to go too much. But it's an interesting thing, but it's because I have not had the chance to ask him, could you explain it? That's what it is, because some things you need to ask people. Like, I've reached out to yourself, and there's probably things that I wanted to ask yourself. And until you ask a person,
you won't know.
You make up your own assumption.
Thank you.
In your head.
Yeah. That question, because I've forgotten, it's escaped me, the reason for 6,000 years.
Yeah.
And when that became the time that science decided and religion decided was the origin of man.
Yes.
So they created a date from when they apparently recorded things for. But you see, much of the things that I do, we don't connect to race. Yeah, because we have various meditations that take you into your past lives. And when you go into your past lives, I've seen big, very powerful Black women recognizing that they were actually, young European boys in previous lives. And we have various meditations where you can walk into rooms and see different versions of yourself as women, men, different cultures as well. So we've been sort of sold a concept to separate us from our own power and have us chasing ideas about color and skin, where the consciousness that you are has played every role. This reality is more like a theater where you get the chance to play every character. And due to the world story, where they've tried to separate people by color, they've given you a virus or an illness that you need to resolve or solve based on the concept of the color of your skin, when your consciousness has no color. I only say this and go in there because there's a lot of, how do you call it, passive smoking that history gives you. And things that you didn't experience, people give them to you as stories to activate some sort of anger within you. And some sort of, I don't feel right. You've fed me with this story. I'm supposed to be annoyed, but I shouldn't be annoyed because you here that is telling me this story wasn't the architect of these acts. And whether these acts took place or whether they were much worse than what you're telling me, neither of us are experiencing it in this moment. Yeah, I know people that have gone to past lives and gone to lives where they were slaves and this and that and things like that. And again, gone to lifetimes where they're white, they're Indian, they're Chinese, they're all different things. This world is kind of what you choose to believe is the story that it is. History, because we used to try and travel, because various meditations, you can travel back in time. And when I used to travel back in time to different places, when I would go there, I would ask them, where is this? Where is that? And the people of the time, they would say, in the books that you're reading. These things didn't exist in the way that you've been told that they exist. All the stories you've heard of the past is the storyteller who's telling you with a bias or with an idea. You know, even when you go back to England and you looked deeper in the books, you would see the ancient Britons were of a black color.
Definitely Cheddar Man.
Cheddar Man. So you see Cheddar Man and all those things. And Cheddar Man came from where? So the ancient people here were different. And even when they approached the school board and said, could you tell the truth? The school board said, oh, we don't really want to change everyone's mind. And that could cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
So they would rather the lie than the truth, because it helped different people to see the world in a different way. Okay. So once you understand that the mind of those in control is to stay in control, so they can leave them get along with it, because
I mean, I think what it is the Western science has that it has a big influence, and like I say, some things are great about science and some things are not good in the wrong hands. So when they said that it begins in Africa, okay, even if we didn't connect to this common ancestor with apes, just the first humanity here, modern humans in Africa. So when they spread around the world, they become other people, the Mongol, like you say, in China, the Indo.